The notification banner lit up my phone screen as I sat in the hospital's quiet on-call room, reviewing patient charts. My coffee, now cold and forgotten, sat untouched after 3 hours of analyzing treatment outcomes. Family chat. Harper home. Mom, Allison is finally debt-free. So proud. Photo. Allison smiling, holding loan documents stamped paid in full. My fingers hovered above the screen. The fluorescent light overhead suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. I opened the family chat, scanning for more context. Had they paid off my loans too? My heart pounded as I scrolled through past messages. Mom's weekend plans, Dad's forwarded article about healthcare administration, Allison's updates about her latest rotation. And now this bombshell dropped into our chat like it was just another casual update. My phone buzzed again. A private message from Allison. Allison, Mom just told me about paying off my loans. Did they do the same for you? I stared at her message, my throat tightening. The fact that she even had to ask said everything. I started typing a response only to delete each attempt. Oh, too curt, too bitter. I guess I'm not as deserving. Too passive-aggressive. Congratulations. That's amazing news. Too insincere. Finally, I just set my phone down, exhaling sharply. The weight of my $250,000 student debt pressed on me harder than ever. Picking up my lukewarm coffee, I took a sip and grimaced at the bitterness. Dr. Chin, my colleague, walked by and paused at my workstation. You okay, Morgan? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Nothing, just family stuff. My phone pinged again. Mom, Morgan, did you see my message about Allison? Call me when you get off your shift. Taking a deep breath, I dialed. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Morgan, honey. I was just about to text you again. Mom said, the sound of rustling in the background. I'm making those specialty cupcakes for Allison's celebration, the ones with the little edible medical symbols on top. I cut straight to the point. I saw your message about Allison's loans, I said evenly, though my stomach twisted into knots. Did you and Dad pay them off? Yes, we did. Isn't it wonderful? She deserves it so much. Mom replied, cheerfully distracted. I stiffened. We both graduated with honors, I said carefully, keeping my voice controlled despite the tremor in my hand. We had the same GPA. I don't understand why you paid off all of Allison's loans but none of mine. There was a pause, then the sound of a tray being set down. Morgan, my mother finally said, adopting that familiar tone of mild disappointment I'd heard all my life. Your sister doesn't have a prestigious mentor like Dr. Bennett guiding her. You've always had advantages. Allison didn't. A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Dr. Catherine Bennett had become my research advisor because I earned that position. 80-hour weeks in the pediatric neurology lab, sleeping on the office couch while Allison vacationed in Aspen with our parents. My so-called advantage had been sheer exhaustion and relentless effort, while Allison had always enjoyed unwavering support. So I'm being punished for finding my own opportunities? I asked, my voice tightening as I paced the small on-call room. Muffled voices. Then my father's voice replaced hers. No one is punishing you, Morgan. We're just being practical. Your sister needed more help. You've always been more resourceful. That word. Resourceful. The same word they'd used when they skipped my undergraduate research presentations but flew across the country for Allison's volleyball tournaments. The excuse for why she got a new BMW for her 21st birthday while I received a $50 gas station gift card with a note. For your commute to the lab. I scrolled through old family photos as they continued justifying their decision. There was Allison's volleyball championship, our entire family grinning with pride. Then my science fair victory, a selfie I had taken alone next to my project. Mom's voice interrupted my thoughts. Tomorrow is Allison's debt-free celebration. We've invited the whole family, even some of your former professors. Doesn't that sound lovely? As if graduating debt-free had been Allison's personal achievement rather than a financial gift from our parents. My phone pinged with the invitation as she spoke. A celebration of my sister's accomplishment, delivered in real time. I need to head out, I said, grabbing my bag. Early shift tomorrow. Will you be at Allison's party? Mom asked, concern finally creeping into her voice. Not for me but for how my absence might affect her special day. My stomach twisted. I'll be there, I promised, though the thought made me nauseous. Hanging up, I exhaled shakily. Just as I set my phone down, it buzzed again. Dr. Bennett. Dr. Bennett. Need to speak ASAP about Patterson Fellowship. Call me. Big news. My heart pounded. A cold realization settled over me. My parents' favoritism wasn't just unfair. It was about to become publicly humiliating. And there was nothing I could do to stop what was coming. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Dr. Bennett's office, gathering my courage. Her message had been cryptic but urgent. Need to discuss Patterson Fellowship in person. Good news. My office. 9 a.m. I barely slept, alternating between hope and dread. The Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins was the most prestigious neurosurgical research opportunity in the country. Only one graduating medical student nationwide received it each year. I had applied months ago, never daring to believe I had a real chance. Dr. Bennett's office reflected her reputation. Awards, published research, framed photos with medical luminaries. She looked up from her tablet as I entered, glasses perched at the tip of her nose. "Morgan," she said warmly. "Close the door and sit. I have extraordinary news." My hands clenched my phone as I took the seat opposite her. My breath caught in my throat. The committee has made their decision on the Patterson Fellowship. Her expression was unreadable for a moment. Then she broke into a wide smile. "They've chosen you. Congratulations, Dr. Morgan Harper. You're going to Baltimore." A wave of emotions crashed over me. Joy, disbelief, validation. My vision blurred with tears. The Patterson Fellowship. The pinnacle of neuro research. And it was mine. I don't know what to say, I whispered. For the first time in my life, I had something my parents couldn't minimize. I had one on my own terms. My voice faltered, a stammer escaping as I struggled to find my words. I glanced down at my phone, half expecting this to be some sort of dream. "You earned this," Dr. Bennett stated firmly, leaning forward. "Your research on neurovascular regeneration after traumatic injury was groundbreaking. The committee was particularly impressed by your dual approach, combining surgical innovation with pharmacological intervention." She tapped on her tablet and an official email appeared. The fellowship includes a generous stipend, a housing allowance, and most importantly, complete loan forgiveness. I stared at her as the full weight of her words sank in. Loan forgiveness? All of it? Dr. Bennett nodded. Every penny. You'll be completely debt-free, Morgan. Debt-free. Just like Allison. But through my own merit, not because of parental favoritism. A wave of dizziness hit me as the realization settled in, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "And there's more," Dr. Bennett added, a spark of excitement in her eyes. She leaned in slightly. "I've been invited to Allison's celebration tonight. I received a digital invitation yesterday. Your parents extended it as a courtesy to faculty members, unaware of our close mentorship. If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to announce your fellowship there." My stomach dropped as if I were in an elevator with severed cables. The thought of such a public revelation made my throat dry. "I don't know, Dr. Bennett," I admitted, fidgeting with my phone. "It's supposed to be Allison's night. My parents might think I'm trying to steal her spotlight. They've already made it clear whose achievements they want to celebrate." Dr. Bennett's expression hardened slightly, the warmth in her eyes shifting to something steely. "Morgan," she said carefully, setting aside her reading glasses. "I've observed your family dynamics for the past 2 years. I've seen your parents at hospital functions, heard the way they talk about you and your sister. The constant elevation of Allison and the dismissal of your achievements. It's not subtle." She tapped her fingers thoughtfully against her desk. "I understand your hesitation. It speaks to your character. But sometimes recognition needs to be public in order to be acknowledged. Especially by people who have a pattern of minimizing your accomplishments." I knew she was right. If my parents found out about the fellowship privately, they'd find a way to dismiss it, call it luck instead of hard work. Or worse, suggest that Dr. Bennett had pulled some strings for me. I took a steadying breath. "Okay," I nodded slowly, my heart hammering with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. "You can announce it." Dr. Bennett smiled. "Good. This achievement deserves to be celebrated, Morgan. You've earned this moment." As I left her office, my phone vibrated with multiple notifications. I checked my messages while waiting for the elevator and saw one from Allison. "Allison, Mom is going completely overboard tonight. It's embarrassing. I wish she put this much effort into celebrating both of us. See you there. I blinked, rereading the message to make sure I hadn't imagined it. It was the first time Allison had ever explicitly acknowledged our parents' favoritism. I started typing several responses, deleting each one, unsure how to navigate this unexpected moment of solidarity. Before I could settle on what to say, another message popped up, this time from my mother. Mom, business casual tonight. And please, let your sister have her moment. This is very important to her. Several hospital board members will be there. I quickly took a screenshot of both messages and saved them to my Family Dynamics folder, a digital archive of evidence I had been collecting for years, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. The contrast between the two messages was stark. Had I misjudged Allison all along? Maybe tonight would expose truths my parents had spent 32 years trying to bury. Allison's debt-free celebration was being held at an upscale restaurant in downtown Detroit, offering a breathtaking view of the river. The moment I arrived, I could see the sheer expense. Valet parking, champagne greetings, a professional photographer. My parents had rented out the entire rooftop terrace, a level of extravagance that surely cost thousands. I checked my reflection in the mirrored elevator walls, smoothing down my navy blue dress. Simple but elegant, something I had bought on sale last month. As the doors slid open to the rooftop, my eyes landed on a massive digital display. Congratulations, Dr. Allison Harper. A professional portrait of her in her graduation regalia filled the screen. There was no mention that there were, in fact, 2 Dr. Harpers in the family now. Guests had already started taking selfies with the display, posting them in real time to Instagram. I spotted my mother's carefully curated hashtags. #ProudHarperParents, #daughter. Singular. Daughter. As if I didn't exist. I inhaled deeply, reminding myself, this was Allison's night. Regardless of what Dr. Bennett planned to announce, I wouldn't let old resentments poison my relationship with my twin. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Bennett. Dr. Bennett, running 15 minutes late, traffic. Don't let them corner you before I get there. Morgan. Allison's voice cut through the chatter. She broke away from a group of relatives and rushed over. She looked stunning in a silver cocktail dress, one that probably cost more than my rent. Her blonde hair, identical to mine in color, was styled in a trendy bob, while I kept mine long and simple. He pulled me into a tight hug. Thank God you're here, she whispered. Aunt Patty has already asked me 5 times if I have a boyfriend, and Mom keeps parading me around like I won a Nobel Prize instead of just getting out of debt. Despite my nerves, I laughed. What did you tell Aunt Patty? That I'm married to medicine. Though if she knows any eligible neurosurgeons, I'm accepting applications. She linked her arm through mine, leading me toward the bar. Seriously though, this is insane, she muttered, grabbing 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter. Mom invited half the medical school faculty. Dean Wilson is here with his wife. And look. She subtly gestured toward the other side of the terrace. That's Dr. Reynolds from Detroit Med Center. I scanned the crowd and spotted him instantly. Dr. Olivia Reynolds, chief neurosurgeon, stood nearby, looking poised and authoritative. Wow, I murmured. They really went all out. Too all out, Allison groaned. It's humiliating. And why just for me? We both graduated with honors. We both worked our asses off. She handed me a champagne flute. Mom's been posting about this all week on Facebook, she continued, shaking her head. Our daughter the doctor. Singular. As if you don't exist. The tight knot in my stomach loosened just a little. Maybe Allison saw more than I gave her credit for. I wanted to respond, to finally have the conversation we'd avoided for years. But before I could say anything, I heard my mother's voice. Morgan, Allison. Our mother approached, champagne in one hand, phone in the other, clearly in the middle of documenting the event. Allison, the Hendersons just arrived. You remember Thomas Henderson, the chief of surgery at Cleveland Memorial? The one your father's been telling you about? You should come say hello. She took Allison's arm, effectively separating us. Then she glanced at me, her expression distant, dismissive. I knew Morgan so well. Could you check if the caterers have set out the gluten-free options? Your cousin Beth is being difficult about her diet again. Oh, and make sure they know to bring out the special cake at exactly 8:30. And just like that, I was reduced to catering management while Allison was paraded before hospital administrators who could influence her career. Some things never changed. I watched as my mother guided Allison toward a group of distinguished-looking older physicians, her hand resting protectively on my sister's back. My phone buzzed with a new message from Allison. Save me. SOS. I smiled at her text while directing the waitstaff to the correct table when Dr. Bennett arrived. She was elegance and authority combined, dressed in a striking crimson pantsuit that commanded attention effortlessly. Several heads turned as she stepped onto the terrace. Morgan, she greeted warmly, embracing me. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. She scanned the scene, taking in the professionally decorated banner, the cake adorned with only Allison's name, and the large digital display showcasing a slideshow, primarily featuring Allison with me appearing in the background or at times cropped out entirely. Her sharp gaze landed on my father, who was deep in conversation with Dr. Reynolds, gesturing animatedly towards Allison. Dr. Bennett's voice held a note of controlled anger. This is more complicated than I realized. Across the terrace, my parents were introducing Allison to Dr. Olivia Reynolds, the chief neurosurgeon at Detroit Medical Center. Both Allison and I had applied for residency positions there, but the way my father's animated gestures and my mother's beaming smile played out, it was clear what was happening. They were working connections to secure Allison a spot. My stomach clenched. They had always prioritized networking over merit. Someone nearby captured the moment on their phone, undoubtedly for the event's Instagram hashtag. I inhaled deeply, willing my emotions into submission. Dr. Bennett, my father called, spotting her. He approached, my mother and Allison in tow, his face shifting into his well-rehearsed networking smile. What an honor to have you here. The invitation was somewhat last minute. We weren't sure you'd be able to make it. I wouldn't miss it, Dr. Bennett responded with professional courtesy. Congratulations on having two brilliant daughters graduate from medical school. Thank you, my father said with a practiced chuckle. I understand you've done some work with Morgan? Dr. Bennett's expression cooled slightly. Some work. She arched an eyebrow. Morgan has been my primary research partner for the past 2 years. Her contributions to our traumatic brain injury study were instrumental in its success. In fact, our paper will be published in the Journal of Neurosurgical Research next month. A flicker of surprise crossed my parents' faces, blended with something else, perhaps confusion. It was as if this information didn't align with their perception of me. My mother's camera-ready smile faltered momentarily. How nice, she said vaguely, still gripping Allison's shoulder. Allison has also been deeply involved in neurosurgical research. In fact, Dr. Reynolds was just saying how impressed she is with Allison's application. Anger flared in my chest. That wasn't true. Allison's focus had always been neuropsychiatry, a completely different field. My parents were intentionally misrepresenting her experience, at my expense. I caught Allison's gaze, noting the discomfort in her expression. Dr. Bennett's tone remained polite, but her eyes hardened. Oh, fascinating. I was under the impression Allison's focus was on psychiatric applications rather than surgical interventions. Her work on trauma-induced psychological disorders is quite distinct from Morgan's surgical research. A tense silence fell over our small circle. Allison looked mortified, sending me an apologetic glance. My father cleared his throat, scrambling for a response. My phone vibrated in my clutch. A message from Dr. Bennett, typed discreetly while maintaining eye contact with my parents. This is worse than I thought. Stay strong. Dinner was announced, offering a temporary reprieve. Yet seating arrangements made my place in the family hierarchy glaringly clear. My parents sat at the head table with Allison, our grandparents, and Dr. Reynolds. I was placed at a secondary table with cousins and family friends, near enough to hear but not to engage. We always knew Allison was destined for greatness, my father's voice carried deliberately. Even as a child, she was determined. She's always been our ambitious one. Each word felt like a tiny dagger. I pushed my filet mignon around my plate, my appetite gone. Across the room, Dr. Bennett exchanged glances with me, her sympathy evident. Several guests live-streamed parts of the evening to Instagram. My mother checked social media reactions between courses. When dinner ended, my father tapped his glass for attention. "Thank you all for joining us in celebrating Allison's remarkable achievement," he began, his hospital administrator voice in full effect. "Medical school is a grueling journey, and to emerge not only with a degree but debt-free is truly something special." Polite applause followed. Several guests uploaded his speech directly to social media. Allison shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flicking between me and our father. "We were fortunate to support Allison throughout her education," my mother added, standing beside my father, flawless in her designer dress. "We always believed in investing in her future because we knew she would make us proud." Hot tears burned behind my eyes. The wording was precise and deliberate. They had invested in Allison, not in both their daughters. The message was painfully clear. "Actually," Allison spoke suddenly, standing and taking the microphone from our startled father, "I'd like to say something." A hushed silence fell over the room. My parents stiffened, their choreographed evening going off script. "This celebration feels incomplete," Allison continued. "Morgan and I graduated with identical GPAs. We both worked incredibly hard. Though frankly, Morgan worked even harder because she did it without the support system I had." Whispers rippled through the crowd. My father's smile faltered. "Allison," my mother whispered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Allison insisted. "I can't accept recognition that excludes my sister. It isn't right. It never has been." Tension thickened. Phones recorded every second, documenting the cracks forming in my parents' carefully curated image. Dr. Bennett chose that moment to stand. "If I may add something," she addressed the room, instantly commanding attention. "This seems like the perfect time to share some news about Morgan." My parents exchanged uneasy glances. "Morgan's research on neurovascular regeneration has earned her the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins," Dr. Bennett announced. "For those unfamiliar, this is the most prestigious position offered to a graduating medical student in the country. It comes with full loan forgiveness and a substantial stipend." Gasps and murmurs spread. Dr. Reynolds looked at me with newfound interest. The event photographer abandoned planned shots, turning their lens towards me instead. Dr. Bennett wasn't finished. "Additionally, our department's Merit Scholarship Fund has approved full coverage of the remainder of Morgan's medical school loans in recognition of her extraordinary contributions to our research program." A stunned hush filled the room before applause erupted. People turned to look at me, smiling, nodding, shouting congratulations. My second cousin swiftly edited her Instagram caption, adding #medicalgenius. At the head table, my parents sat frozen, their years of careful narrative building crumbling before their eyes. I was finally free from debt, and every bit of it was earned through my own dedication and perseverance. Across the room, Dr. Bennett caught my gaze and offered a subtle nod, one that conveyed more than words ever could. Vindication. Pride. The shared satisfaction of long overdue justice. My phone vibrated incessantly in my clutch as notifications poured in. Colleagues tagging me in celebratory posts, professional connections sending congratulatory messages. The medical community, the very one I had worked tirelessly to impress, was finally taking notice. After Dr. Bennett's announcement, the entire energy in the room shifted, like iron filings aligning to a new magnetic pull. Faculty members who once gravitated toward Allison were now approaching me, business cards in hand, eager to discuss my research and extend their congratulations. "Your work on pediatric neuroplasticity after trauma is truly groundbreaking," said the neurology department chair, a woman who had barely acknowledged my presence during rounds. "I'd love to explore your findings further before you leave for Baltimore." To my surprise, several clinical supervisors began sharing stories of my work with patients, stories I hadn't realized they'd even noticed. "Remember that 8-year-old with the severe TBI from the car accident?" Dr. Patel asked a group of colleagues gathered around me. "Morgan was the one who identified the subtle indicators of improving function that we all missed. That child is walking today because of her keen observation." Meanwhile, my parents remained frozen at their table, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. They weren't just grappling with the news of my prestigious fellowship and loan forgiveness. They were witnessing the unraveling of the narrative they had so carefully crafted about their daughters. The quiet, self-sufficient twin they had consistently overlooked was now the center of professional admiration. Their meticulously planned celebration had transformed into something entirely unexpected. My mother whispered frantically to my father, her phone, with its social media posts about Allison, forgotten beside her half-eaten dessert. Their picture-perfect family illusion was crumbling, and for once they had no script to follow. Allison wove her way through the crowd, approaching me with 2 champagne flutes in hand. "Congratulations, sis," she said warmly, clinking her glass against mine. "The Patterson Fellowship. That's incredible. Why didn't you tell me?" "I only found out this morning," I admitted, the reality still sinking in. "And I didn't want to overshadow your celebration." Allison frowned, a hint of disappointment in her eyes. "This whole ridiculous party was Mom and Dad's idea, not mine," she said in a hushed voice. "I actually tried to talk them out of it, but you know how they are once they've set their minds on something. Dad was all about networking, and Mom was obsessed with getting the perfect photos for their Christmas newsletter." I blinked, surprised. "You tried to stop them?" "Of course I did." Allison looked genuinely hurt that I would doubt her. "Morgan, I've always known they treated us differently. She hesitated, glancing toward our parents. "I didn't know how to fix it without making things worse. I was scared that if I pushed back too hard they'd cut me off entirely." "I know that sounds cowardly, but—" "It's not cowardly," I interrupted, squeezing her hand. "They put you in an impossible situation." Before she could respond, Dr. Olivia Reynolds approached. Her demeanor completely changed from earlier when she had been chatting with my parents. "Dr. Harper," she addressed me directly rather than Allison. "Dr. Bennett's account of your research was impressive. Have you considered bringing your work to our neurosurgery department instead of Johns Hopkins after your fellowship?" I blinked in shock. This was sudden, especially coming from someone who had barely glanced my way before. Allison, beaming with pride, wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "That's a generous offer, Dr. Reynolds, but Morgan has already accepted the Patterson Fellowship. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her research. But," she added with a confident smile, "you should know my sister never stops at just one groundbreaking discovery. I'd bet she'll have another major study underway within months of arriving in Baltimore. Her work on neural regeneration pathways has huge implications for your trauma center." Dr. Reynolds raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed by Allison's advocacy. "Well, when your fellowship is complete, keep Detroit in mind. We'd be fortunate to have you. Both of you. The neuropsychiatric applications of Morgan's surgical techniques could integrate well into an advanced treatment program." After she walked away, I turned to Allison in disbelief. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said simply. "But I wanted to." Across the room, I noticed our parents finally rising from their table, moving hesitantly in our direction. Their approach was slow, interrupted by guests eager to discuss me for once, a novel experience that unsettled them. My mother's polished smile wavered, and my father's confident stance was visibly diminished. "Here they come," Allison murmured, squeezing my arm. "Ready for this?" "Not really," I admitted, taking another sip of champagne. "Dr. Bennett had some rather impressive things to say about you," my father said when they finally reached us, his tone carefully balanced between pride and disbelief. His eyes darted around, noting how many influential professionals were now focused on me. "The Patterson Fellowship. That's quite an honor." "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother added, her voice tinged with an almost accusatory edge. "We could have helped prepare you for the interview." "Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly, meeting her gaze directly. "You made it clear where your support and interest lay." My parents exchanged uneasy glances. "That's not fair, Morgan," my father started, his usual authoritative tone slipping. "We supported you both differently," my mother quickly interjected, pasting on her social smile as she sensed people watching. "Because you had different needs. Allison needed more guidance while you've always been so independent." Allison sighed, her patience thinning. "Mom, Dad, let's not do this tonight. But we are going to have a real conversation about this. Soon. All of us." She turned to me, her expression firm. "No more pretending." Dr. Bennett appeared at my elbow, rescuing me. "Morgan, the dean would like a word. Something about featuring your fellowship in the alumni magazine." She smiled politely at my parents, but her eyes were sharp. "You must be incredibly proud to have raised such accomplished daughters." though I imagine it must be especially rewarding to see Morgan's achievements recognized after all she's overcome. The emphasis on overcome was subtle yet impossible to miss. My parents had the grace to look embarrassed. Well, my mother said weakly, her confidence rattled, we've always known Morgan was special. Too little too late,